The storm had been rolling across the horizon for hours, a copper-red wall of dust that swallowed the desert whole. Jonas Corin tightened the straps on the solar tarp over his workshop roof and muttered under his breath about the timing. A storm meant downtime, meant repairs put on hold, meant another evening of coaxing the old hydroponics system to keep water dripping through clogged pipes. He turned his head as his daughter's voice cut through the growl of the wind. "Dad!" Elara's small figure was silhouetted against the dusk, hair whipping wild in the rising gusts. She was pointing at the sky. Jonas straightened, squinting upward. Through the haze, a streak of silver fire burned across the heavens, tearing a line from zenith to horizon. Too steady for lightning, too bright for a meteor. His gut tightened with the old mechanic's instinct that told him what was a falling rock and what was something else. "Inside, Elara," he barked, though his voice faltered. She shook her head, eyes wide, mouth parted in awe. "It's beautiful." The streak dipped lower, angling, fighting against invisible resistance. Not falling, it was trying to land. Jonas's heart stuttered. Ships didn't come here, not to Tyros V. Not unless they were desperate. The burning trail vanished beyond the low dunes east of New Caraway, ending with a dull concussion that trembled through the ground under their boots. A distant plume of dust rose. Elara looked back at him, breathless. "We have to go." Jonas cursed. Every sense screamed to stay put, to wait until the storm passed, to let whatever stranger had fallen into their wasteland fend for themselves. But Elara's eyes, he saw his wife's gaze in them, wide and shining with that impossible mix of fear and hope. He ground his teeth. "Get your coat," he said. By the time they reached the dune ridge, the storm had begun to break around them, scattering fine grit that stung the skin. The crash site smoldered in the hollow beyond. Jonas halted, the sight stealing his breath. It wasn't a ship, not like any he had ever seen. No twisted hull, no scorched plating. The thing before him pulsed faintly, like the heart of some titanic creature, half buried in sand. Its surface shimmered, scales of opalescent matter that shifted colors in waves. Thin mist curled from rents along its side where the desert had torn into living metal. Elara clutched his sleeve. "Dad," her voice was barely a whisper. Something moved near the wound in the vessel. Jonas pulled her close, shielding her with his body. A figure emerged slowly, crawling, one arm dragging across the sand. For a heartbeat Jonas thought it was water glistening on her skin, but then the light shifted and he realized it was scales, tiny and iridescent, catching the weak starlight. Her form was unmistakably humanoid, slender, graceful, though her legs seemed to blur at the knees into a sweeping arc of translucent fin. Jonas's mouth went dry. He had heard whispers of such beings in spacer bars, dismissed them as tall tales. Now one of them lay broken in the dust at his feet. The alien lifted her head. Eyes like liquid silver met his. Her voice was soft, layered with harmonics that seemed to resonate in his chest. "Help, please." Elara tugged at his arm again, trembling not from fear but wonder. Jonas felt her breath warm against him as she whispered, so quiet he almost didn't hear it over the wind. "Dad, she might be an angel." The alien flinched as though struck, her gaze locking on the child, widening with something Jonas couldn't name, fear, sorrow, recognition. For the first time since she had spoken, her glow dimmed. Jonas held his daughter tighter, his mind whirring through possibilities. Angel, alien, fugitive, it didn't matter. He saw the gash along her side, the blood, if it was blood, that glistened dark against her luminous skin. He saw the faint spasms of the vessel, alive but failing. Storm grit lashed against them. Jonas's rational mind screamed to walk away, to take Elara home, to lock the doors and pray the stranger vanished before anyone else saw. Yet he heard the rasp of the alien's breath, fragile, fading. He felt Elara's fingers digging into his arm, not in fear but in plea. He muttered a curse to himself. "Come on." Kneeling, he slid his hands under the alien's arm, surprised at how light she felt, how cool. She gasped, scales flashing a sudden bright surge of color, then subsided. Jonas hoisted her awkwardly, shifting her weight over his shoulder. Elara pressed close, eyes never leaving the strange being's face. The ship pulsed once more, as if sensing its occupant's departure, then fell still. Jonas didn't look back as he carried her up the slope, sand crunching under his boots, storm winds howling around them. He only knew two things for certain. The first, he had no idea how to keep this creature alive, let alone fix whatever strange living craft she had arrived in. The second, his daughter's words had struck the alien deeper than any wound. And that frightened him more than the storm, more than the crash, more than the risk of discovery. Because Elara believed what she had seen. And for one dangerous, fleeting moment, Jonas almost believed it too. Jonas shouldered the workshop door open with a grunt, the hinges shrieking against the storm winds. He staggered inside, burden shifting across his back, then kicked the door shut. The latch clattered home, muffling the world into a dim cocoon of oil, dust, and the smell of iron. He lowered the alien carefully onto the broad worktable normally reserved for engine housings and broken turbines. She lay there motionless, scales glimmering faintly beneath the flickering light strips, her chest rising and falling too shallowly. Elara climbed onto a stool beside the table, hands clasped tight against her mouth. Her eyes never left the stranger's face. Jonas wiped grit from his forehead with the back of his hand, forcing calm into his breathing. He had patched up men torn by machinery, miners crushed by rockslides, once even a surveyor who'd tangled with a sand worm. But this wasn't flesh he recognized. The gash across her side shimmered as though liquid light were seeping from it. "Dad, she's dying," Elara whispered. He grunted, forcing himself into the rhythm he knew best: assess, act, adapt. He rummaged through a drawer, hauling out rolls of synth bandage and a canister of sealant foam. "I don't even know if this will work on her," he muttered. The alien stirred at the sound of his voice. Her lips parted. "Not yours," the words trembled with strange harmonics, carrying an echo that brushed the air like a chord. Jonas leaned over her. "Stay still. You'll bleed out if I don't close this." Her eyes, silver depths, shifting faintly as if reflecting unseen stars, focused on him. For a moment he thought she might argue, but her head sagged against the metal surface, eyelids fluttering. Elara tugged at his sleeve. "She understands you." "Maybe," he said. He pressed the sealant nozzle to the wound. The foam hissed as it expanded, conforming to the strange contours of her body. She gasped, scales flaring bright in a cascade of colors, violet to green to gold, before dimming again. Elara winced. "You're hurting her." "I'm keeping her alive," Jonas said sharply, though guilt pricked his chest. He bound the wound in synth bandage, wrapping the shimmering torso as best he could. When he was done, the glow of her scales steadied. For several heartbeats, silence filled the workshop, broken only by the distant moan of the storm pressing against the walls. Elara leaned close to the alien's face. "Can you hear me?" The silver eyes flicked open again, focusing on the girl. The alien's mouth curved faintly, though it was hard to tell if it was pain or something else. "Child," the sound was less a word than a note, rising and falling with a haunting sweetness. Elara smiled, her fear dissolving into awe. "See, Dad? She's not dangerous." Jonas rubbed a hand over his jaw, unsettled. Dangerous wasn't the word he would use. Fragile, strange, unknown, yes. But the way those eyes had fixed on Elara when she spoke out there in the storm, the way the alien had flinched at the word angel, that gnawed him. He turned back to the table. "Who are you?" Her breath shivered, and the harmonics bent around her answer. "Celira." The syllables seemed to carry weight beyond sound, like a chord reverberating in his chest. Jonas tested the name on his tongue. "Celira." Her gaze lingered on Elara. "She sees." Jonas's stomach tightened. He wanted to ask what that meant, but Alara was already brimming with questions of her own. Are you from the stars? Did you fall here? Is your ship alive? You look like you're made of the ocean, but there's no ocean here. Jonas raised a hand. Enough. She needs rest. Salira's lips moved again, barely audible. Ship, hurt. Must mend. Jonas frowned. That thing out there, whatever it is, it's not going anywhere tonight. And neither are you. Her eyes closed, exhaustion overtaking her. Jonas stood back, exhaling long and slow. His hands shook faintly, and he flexed them as though trying to shed the tension. Alara watched him, her small face solemn. You're going to fix her ship, aren't you? She asked. He stared at her. Do you have any idea what you're asking? That wasn't a shuttle, Alara. It was, alive. I don't even know if I can fix it, let alone what happens if someone else sees it. But you're the best mechanic on Tyros, she said, as though it were fact, not praise. If anyone can, it's you. He wanted to snap back, to remind her that patching together failing tractors and scavenged water pumps wasn't the same as repairing an alien vessel that breathed and pulsed like a living thing. But she looked at him with such certainty, her faith pressing against his cynicism until words caught in his throat. Instead, he dragged a chair to the table and sat heavily, watching the alien breathe. Outside, the storm rumbled on, masking them from the rest of New Caraway. For now. He thought of the miners, the town elders, the men who came to him with broken machines and expected him to work miracles with scrap. If they knew what lay in his workshop now, their fear would turn fast and sharp. Alara leaned her head against his arm. She might be an angel, she said again, softer this time, as if the words were meant only for him. Jonas closed his eyes. He wanted to tell her no, that angels didn't bleed, that angels didn't crawl broken out of burning wrecks. But the image of silver eyes locking onto his daughter's face in the storm returned, and the memory of that strange, fragile flinch. He said nothing. The wind screamed against the roof. The lights flickered once, then steadied. Salira's faint glow cast ripples of color across the workshop walls, bathing them in shifting hues as though they sat beneath the surface of some long-forgotten sea. Jonas stared at the play of light, jaw clenched, and knew sleep would not come for him tonight. The storm died with the dawn. Jonas stood at the threshold of the workshop, rubbing grit from his beard as he watched the pale sun rise over the desert. The air outside was still sharp with dust, the dunes reshaped into new ridges and hollows somewhere beyond those shifting sands lay the alien vessel, silent in its crater. He tried not to think of it pulsing in the night like a wounded animal waiting for him to return. Behind him came the faint rustle of movement. He turned to see Alara crouched beside the work table, chin propped on folded arms as she watched Salira. The alien's breathing had steadied through the night, her body shimmering faintly in rhythms Jonas couldn't decipher. She had spoken only once since collapsing, murmuring a sound too soft to catch, before sinking again into exhausted silence. Alara looked up at him. She's better, isn't she? Jonas stepped inside, pulling the door closed. Better than last night. That doesn't mean safe. She's strong, Alara said, with the unshakable certainty of a child. She just needs her ship. Jonas grunted. He busied himself with the coffee pot, scooping grounds into the filter. The familiar hiss and sputter steadied him. He needed routine, something to keep his hands moving, his mind anchored. The workshop smelled of metal, oil, and now faintly of salt. He noticed it whenever he drew too near Salira, a tang like the sea he had never seen but remembered from descriptions in his wife's old books. When the mug was warm in his hands, he finally turned back to the table. Alara had shifted closer to Salira's head, whispering something he couldn't hear. He frowned. What are you saying to her? Alara glanced at him, sheepish but unafraid. Stories. The ones Mom used to tell me. About the Star Guardians. Jonas's gut twisted. Alara. She likes them, the girl insisted. She listens. Jonas followed her gaze. The alien's eyes were open, half-lidded but glimmering faintly. She was listening. Her lips parted, a breath escaping like a chord hummed at the edge of hearing. Guardians, she echoed, voice layered and soft. Old word. Jonas set down his mug with a clang. You understand her? Elara tilted her head. I think so. Not all of it. But some. He stared between them, feeling suddenly out of step with the moment, like the two of them shared a language he couldn't hear. He stepped forward. Listen. Selira. He stumbled over the name but pressed on. Your ship. It's out there in the dunes. If I'm going to look at it, I need to know, what am I dealing with? Metal? Circuits? Or, his eyes flicked over her glowing skin, the faint pulse beneath the bandages. Something else? Her gaze shifted from Elara to him. Living. Bonded. Hurt. Jonas exhaled through his nose. That confirmed what he already feared. Repairing engines was one thing. Healing something alive, that was another world entirely. I don't have the tools for that, he muttered. You have hands, she said simply. The harmonics in her tone resonated in the workshop's thin walls. You mend broken things. This, no different. No different. Jonas barked a laugh, though there was no humor in it. Lady, I patch harvesters and pump systems with scrap metal and spit. I can't heal some star creature's ship like it's a busted water line. Selira's expression didn't change. Her eyes lingered on him, unblinking. You can. The words sank into the air like an oath, and for a heartbeat Jonas felt them settle in his chest. He shook himself. Even if I tried, what happens if someone sees? You think New Caraway's ready for this? They'll drag you out of here before you can breathe twice. Elara stood now, her small fists clenched. Then we keep her secret. No one has to know. Jonas met his daughter's gaze, saw the defiance there, the same stubborn fire her mother had carried. He rubbed at his temple. Dad, Elara said softly, you always told me machines have souls. That's why you can fix them, because you listen. Maybe her ship is the same. Jonas flinched. He remembered saying that once, late at night, when Elara had been scared and he tried to comfort her. He hadn't thought she'd remember. Selira stirred, lifting her head slightly from the table. The bandages glowed faintly where they pressed against her scales. Child, seize. Her voice broke on the last word, and she sagged back. Jonas cursed under his breath. He reached for the medkit again, checking the bindings, tightening where the foam had loosened. His fingers brushed against her skin and for a heartbeat he swore he felt not just flesh but something humming beneath, as if energy coursed through her body like current in a wire. She flinched, eyes flickering open again. Ship, calls. Weak. Must answer. Jonas drew his hand back. He didn't understand half of what she meant, but he understood desperation when he heard it. Elara caught his sleeve. Please, Dad. The workshop was quiet except for the low hum of the power cells. Jonas looked at his daughter, then at the alien glowing faintly in the half-light, then back toward the door that led out into the endless dunes. Finally, he sighed. All right. I'll look. Elara's face lit up with relief. He jabbed a finger at her. But you stay here. You keep her quiet. If anyone knocks, you say nothing. Not a word, Elara. She nodded solemnly. Jonas grabbed his coat and tools, strapping them across his chest. At the door he hesitated, glancing back. Elara had already returned to the alien side, holding her hand gently as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Selira's eyes were closed, but the faintest curve touched her lips. Jonas stepped into the desert wind. The sun was climbing higher, turning the dunes to a blazing sea of gold. Somewhere out there, a living starship was waiting for him, broken and breathing in the sand. He pulled his hood low and set his boots toward the ridge, muttering to himself. Angels or not, I must be out of my damn mind. Jonas trudged across the dunes, each step sinking into the sand that had shifted overnight, reshaping the landscape into ridges and shallow craters. The storm had passed, but the desert was still unwelcoming, hot winds carried grit, and the sun glared down without mercy. He clutched his toolbox tightly, each strap digging into his shoulders, and cursed himself for not bringing the crawler's all-terrain skiff. He would have to manage on foot, balancing tools, medkit, and a wary curiosity that tugged at him like a stubborn shadow. The crater came into view, a shallow hollow in the sand where the alien vessel had landed. From a distance, it seemed like a cluster of opalescent stones, shimmering against the gold dunes. As he drew closer, he realized the ship wasn't just metal, wasn't just rock, it pulsed, faintly, in rhythm with some invisible heartbeat. Tiny tendrils along its hull twitched as though testing the air, sensing his approach. Jonas knelt at the edge of the crater, eyes scanning the surface. The desert had scraped away much of the outer layer, some panels were bent, some edges scorched, and others, where the living material seemed most exposed, glowed faintly as though the vessel itself were breathing. He swallowed hard. Machines that lived weren't supposed to act like this, weren't supposed to respond to your presence like some startled animal. Yet here he was, staring at something that pulsed when he moved, recoiled when he spoke. Elara, he muttered softly, though he knew she couldn't hear him here. You'd lose your mind if you saw this up close. He set down the toolbox, opening it with a creak of hinges. Tools clattered inside, spanners, flux calibrators, synth bonding wires, a medkit, and a few pieces of salvaged circuits. He wasn't sure which of these would help and which would make things worse. He sighed. Logic told him he didn't belong here, but he was already past the point of turning back. Leaning over the hull, he examined the damage. The surface was porous in places, soft to the touch, almost like rubberized coral. In others, metallic-looking panels ran along the spine, punctuated with translucent sections that pulsed faintly, as if light traveled through them like blood. A long crack ran along the dorsal ridge, the edges pulsing weakly with blue-gold light. He reached out, pressing a hand against the surface. The ship flinched, or maybe it was responding to heat and pressure, but a jolt ran through his fingers, low and humming. Jonas yanked his hand back, blinking at the faint echo in his palms. "What the hell are you made of?" he muttered. Then a voice, soft but unmistakable, carried on the wind. "Pain, yes, mending." He froze. The voice wasn't mechanical, it was Solira's, carried not through speakers but somehow through the air itself, layered with harmonic undertones. He looked around. No one else was near. He swallowed. "All right. Let's see if I can make sense of this." He touched the crack again, fingers tracing the pulsating edges. The material felt warm, almost alive, yielding slightly under pressure, then resisting. Jonas pulled out a small synth bonding injector, usually used for hydraulic seals in harvesters. He jabbed it carefully into a split panel. The injector hissed, and the vessel's pulse flickered. Colors rippled across the surface, iridescent waves he had never seen in any alloy or crystal. A soft sigh came from somewhere above, a human-like breath that chilled and warmed simultaneously. "Caution, always, yes." Jonas froze again. The voice was coming from the ship itself. Or at least, from the living entity that was the ship. He blinked, muttered, "Talk to me, then." "Bonding, yes, cautious, good." He frowned. "You understand me?" The pulse of light beneath his hands shifted, brightening and dimming in a pattern he could almost read. Bond, mend, life, help. Jonas's chest tightened. Every instinct screamed to run, but another part, the part that raised Elara, that fixed broken engines in impossible conditions, kept him rooted in place. He began working, careful now to match the rhythms of the pulse, adjusting pressure, injecting small amounts of sealant, coaxing edges to close without overcompressing. Time slipped past unnoticed. The sun climbed, dipped, and climbed again as Jonas worked, knees scraping the sand, hands aching. Sweat stung his eyes, mixed with dust, and yet he couldn't tear himself away. The vessel responded, faint waves of color coursing across its surface, and Jonas felt, understood. Not in words, but in vibration, in motion, in something almost spiritual. Then, a sharp snap of a panel edge caught his attention. He froze, sensing a sudden tension in the pulse. The ship shuddered faintly, almost as though testing him. Jonas's breath caught. Easy, easy, he adjusted the panel, fingers gentle but firm. The trembling eased. A faint voice came again, layered and trembling. Trust, yes, necessary. Jonas swallowed hard. He realized, for the first time, he wasn't just repairing metal or circuits. He was mending something alive. Something intelligent. Something aware. The desert around him was quiet, empty, indifferent, but the ship pulsed, alive beneath his hands, and he knew the moment he accepted that, the stakes had shifted. This wasn't just about fixing a vessel. It was about survival, for her, for Elara, for himself if anyone discovered what lay out here. The light rippled along the hull, brushing his arms with colors that made him dizzy and awestruck. The voice came again, softer this time, almost reverent. You, chosen, yes, help. Jonas shook his head, trying to anchor himself in reason. I'm no one's hero, he muttered. Yet he continued working, matching the rhythms of her pulse, listening to the faint harmonic signals vibrating in his bones, coaxing the wound closed panel by panel. Hours passed. The sun burned high and began its slow descent. The desert heat pressed against him, but Jonas barely noticed. The pulse beneath his hand steadied, color waves spreading evenly now, as though the ship had accepted his efforts. He sat back on the sand, leaning heavily on his toolbox, staring at the shimmering vessel. For the first time since finding her in the storm, he allowed himself to breathe fully, though unease prickled his skin. The task wasn't finished, he knew it could go wrong at any second. But for now, she was stabilizing, alive, and the ship was responding. A soft voice floated across the dunes. Father, daughter, see. Jonas glanced up. Elara had crested the ridge silently, watching. Her eyes were wide, silver in the afternoon light, and he realized she had come anyway. He let out a long breath, standing slowly. All right, kid. But stay close. And don't touch anything until I say. Elara smiled faintly, brushing dust from her coat. She trusts you, Dad. Jonas met Celira's luminous eyes across the hull. The alien shimmered faintly, colors rippling in response. A pulse, almost like a heartbeat, resonated across the sand toward them. Jonas shivered. This wasn't just a machine. It was alive. And whatever this journey demanded next, he knew it would change everything. He closed his fists around the handles of his tools. The sun began to dip toward the horizon, shadows stretching long across the dunes. Somewhere in that stretching light, Celira's ship waited, breathing, waiting, calling. Jonas took a step closer, and whispered, "All right, let's finish this." Jonas spread a tarp on the sand beside the ship and began unloading tools and scavenged materials from his toolbox. Each piece felt insignificant in his hands compared to the living vessel before him. The panels glimmered faintly as he worked, responding to his presence, almost impatient with his slow, human movements. The pulse beneath his fingers was steady now, but faint ripples of tension ran along its surface whenever he adjusted a bent edge or pressed a sealant injector into a fractured joint. "Elara, keep back," he said, voice sharper than intended. She froze a pace behind him, hands folded tight, eyes wide. "I just want to help," she said softly, stepping forward despite the warning. Jonas rubbed at his temples. "You can help by staying out of the way. Got it?" She nodded, but didn't move. Her gaze lingered on the alien, who watched them both with silver eyes half-lidded, scales shimmering in slow waves of violet and gold. Jonas wondered if the girl's fascination was dangerous, or if it was exactly what Celira needed. He leaned over the ship again, examining the dorsal ridge. The crack ran nearly a meter, edges jagged but somehow alive. He traced the line with a gloved hand, feeling faint heat and vibration beneath his fingers. He had repaired water lines with less predictable flow than this, yet somehow he knew he was in unfamiliar territory. The vessel didn't just resist, it responded, coaxed, tested. "Breathe," Celira murmured, voice barely audible, resonating like a chord beneath the air. "Flow, careful." Jonas exhaled and set to work. The first step was to reinforce the fractured hull. He applied bonding foam, carefully pressing it into the living material. The surface flinched slightly under his touch, then pulsed and relaxed. He adjusted pressure and angle, injecting wiring harvested from an old generator into translucent conduits along the spine. Color rippled along the panels, blues, greens, golds, like liquid fire under the sun. Elara moved closer again, curiosity winning over caution. She knelt, watching Jonas work, then reached out toward the pulsing scales. Jonas snapped, "No." She froze, hands halfway raised. "Sorry. I just." "Stay still." His voice softened. "She's alive, Elara. Don't touch her." "Not yet." The girl nodded, retreating a few steps, but she kept her eyes fixed on the alien's face. Jonas took a deep breath and focused on the next task, aligning the dorsal stabilizers. They were bent, twisted by impact, and he had no blueprint for a living ship. He studied the structure, tracing the lines with his fingers, feeling the pulse beneath him. Then he realized he had to trust the vessel as much as he trusted his own hands. He pressed, nudged, coaxed the stabilizers into place. The hull pulsed brighter with every correction, colors rippling in appreciation, or warning. He couldn't tell which. A low hum vibrated through the sand. Jonas froze. The ship's response was almost like a heartbeat accelerating in tandem with his own pulse. He realized the vessel wasn't just conscious, it was aware. Every movement, every adjustment, was communicated in light, color, vibration. He shivered. "Elara," he said softly, almost to himself. "You might be right." The girl blinked. "What?" "I might not be the only one seeing her." Celira's head lifted slightly, eyes tracking his movements. A pulse of color surged across her scales, faintly brushing against his hands as if acknowledging his words. He continued the repairs, now working with a strange, careful rhythm. Every adjustment was measured, precise, mindful of the pulse beneath his fingers. The dorsal ridge finally aligned, the fracture reinforced, and he let the bonding foam set. The vessel's glow steadied, brighter now, more even, like a chest taking deep, steady breaths. Jonas exhaled, wiping sweat and dust from his forehead. He had no idea if this would hold under flight, but it was the first time he felt the vessel's resistance ease. Relief surged briefly, only to be replaced by an unsettling awareness. The desert around them was silent. Too silent. He looked up and saw movement along the dune ridge. Shadowed figures, half hidden by the shifting sand and sunlight, moving swiftly toward the crater. Raiders. He recognized the markings on their coats from past scouting missions, well-equipped scavengers who prowled the frontier, always looking for salvageable tech. "Elara," he hissed, grabbing her arm. "Inside, now. Quick." Her hand clutched his, fear flashing in her wide eyes, but she didn't resist. They ducked behind a ridge as the raiders drew closer, scanning the desert for signs of the unusual. Jonas peeked over the sand, heart hammering. They don't know it's alive, not yet. But if they do. He swallowed hard. Celira's vessel pulsed in a slow, steady rhythm behind them, unaware of the danger, or perhaps sensing it and waiting. Dad, Elara whispered, voice trembling. What if they hurt her? They won't, he said, though the certainty in his own voice faltered. We'll finish the repairs first. Then we figure out the rest. The raiders came closer, scanning the dunes, talking in low, clipped tones. Jonas's mind raced. He had to act fast. Repairing the ship was no longer just a matter of mechanics, it was a race against time, against humans who couldn't comprehend what they were chasing. He crouched, inspecting the hull. The color waves along the vessel's surface flickered faintly as if sensing danger, responding to the tension in the air. Jonas realized that Solira's ship wasn't just alive, it was aware, capable of communicating with him if he listened closely. A thought struck him, sharp and unnerving: if the raiders saw her, they wouldn't just take her. They would destroy her. Or worse. He glanced at Elara, crouched beside the dune, trembling but resolute. Kid, he muttered, you were right. She's more than just an alien. She's something else. Something important. Elara's small hand squeezed his. Then let's not let anyone stop us. Jonas nodded. He turned back to the ship, rolling up his sleeves. Every muscle in his body tensed with purpose. The desert sun beat down on them, shadows stretching long across the dunes, but Jonas felt a strange calm settle in his chest. Repair first. Protect second. And somehow, trust the vessel. He pressed his hands against the hull again, feeling the pulse beneath him, steady, aware, alive. The ship was breathing. Waiting. And with the raiders drawing nearer, Jonas realized there was no turning back. We finish this, he murmured, voice low. No matter what. The ship pulsed in answer, colors rippling across its surface in quiet affirmation. And for the first time since he had seen it crash, Jonas believed that together, they could survive the desert, the storm, and whatever else was coming. Jonas worked quickly, every movement precise, every decision weighed against the hum of life beneath his hands. The desert was quiet except for the distant hiss of sand sliding down dunes, and the low vibration pulsing from the ship, responding to his touch as if aware of the looming threat. He adjusted another stabilizer, careful not to overcompress it, and the hull quivered slightly in appreciation, or warning. He couldn't tell which. Elara, he hissed, glancing toward the ridge where she crouched, stay low. Keep your head down. She nodded, though her eyes never left Solira's glowing form. Jonas felt her gaze like a tether, pulling him forward, reminding him of why he had committed to this impossible task. A distant clatter reached him, and he froze. Figures appeared on the crest of a dune, moving cautiously but purposefully. Raiders. They were scouting, circling the area, clearly drawn by the unusual shimmer in the sand, or perhaps by the energy he had accidentally disturbed while stabilizing the hull. Jonas's stomach tightened. They're not here for water, he muttered under his breath. Or scrap. They're here for her. He pressed his hands against the dorsal ridge again, feeling the pulse beneath his fingers. The ship's response was subtle at first, a barely perceptible flicker, then a wave of iridescent color that swept across the scales like water over glass. He whispered, stay calm. Help me finish this. The alien stirred, silver eyes opening slowly, tracking Jonas's movements. A faint harmonic vibration carried through the air. Danger, yes. I know, Jonas said, voice low. I see them. Elara's voice trembled. Dad. What if they take her? They won't, he said, though he didn't allow himself to fully believe it. We finish first. Then we figure out the rest. He moved to the fracture along the hull, pressing bonding foam into the crack and smoothing it carefully along the living material. The ship pulsed beneath his touch, subtle shifts of color indicating its acknowledgement. Jonas adjusted the injector's flow, matching the rhythm of the pulses as closely as he could. The hull began to stabilize, the glow spreading evenly along the ridge. A shadow fell over him. Jonas snapped his head up. One of the raiders had moved closer, descending a dune too far to be casual. He ducked instinctively, the pulse beneath his hands surging sharply. The ship's scales shimmered violently, a warning or an attempt to communicate, he couldn't tell. "Elara, behind me," he hissed, spinning to pull her low. She dropped instantly, pressed against the sand as though her small body could vanish into it. Jonas' eyes flicked to the raider. The man paused, scanning, then moved on, unaware of the living thing he was approaching. Jonas exhaled. He couldn't waste time. Each second spent hiding was a second the ship went unhealed, a second the raiders could discover it. He resumed his work, injecting wiring and smoothing reinforced seams along the hull. The colors rippled beneath his fingers, soothing, guiding him in ways he could not have predicted. Celira shifted slightly, fins undulating faintly against the sand. "Stronger, yes," she whispered. The harmonics carried over the dune, subtle but persistent, almost like a heartbeat in time with Jonas's own. The second raider emerged, closer now, moving with deliberate caution. Jonas felt the pulse intensify beneath his hands, ripples of light brushing across his arms. He realized the ship was reacting to danger, testing him, gauging his decisions. His hands moved faster, smoother, in synchrony with the living vessel, as if they were partners in an unspoken dance. "Elara, stay quiet," he said again. "And no sudden moves." She nodded, eyes wide. Her small hand brushed against Celira's, trembling with awe, and the alien responded with a faint flare of color, like a ripple of gratitude. Jonas swallowed. The bond between them, the girl and the alien, was unmistakable. He knew she could see what he could not, sense what he could only guess at. He worked with a precision born of desperation. Each seam, each fracture, each stabilizer he adjusted brought the vessel closer to readiness. Colors rippled more evenly now, the pulse steadying, the ship beginning to feel like something whole again. The raiders paused, scanning the dunes, suspicious now. Jonas tensed, listening to their distant calls, the rustle of their boots over sand. One figure had stopped near the edge of the crater, peering into the hollow. Jonas's fingers hovered over the last fractured panel. One more adjustment, one more press of the injector, and the hull would stabilize enough for Celira to move. "Almost, yes," she murmured, harmonics vibrating faintly through the air. Jonas felt sweat sting his eyes. His muscles burned, his mind raced, but he ignored the pain. One more panel, one more adjustment. The last fracture sealed, reinforced. The pulse beneath his hand steadied fully, glowing with a soft, even light. The vessel seemed to sigh, a gentle vibration coursing outward like the slow exhale of a deep lung. "Elara," he whispered, glancing at his daughter, "watch closely. We might just get out of this." She crouched low, eyes wide and shining. "She's awake." Celira's head lifted slightly, fins rippling gently. Colors flowed across her scales in waves of violet and gold, brighter, steadier, harmonious. She regarded them both with silver eyes, and for the first time since the crash, Jonas felt that she trusted them completely. A sudden sound made his heart stop. One of the raiders had come dangerously close, sliding down the dune toward the ship. Jonas leapt to intercept, hand gripping a makeshift wrench, ready to strike if necessary. The ship pulsed sharply beneath his fingers, a surge of light running through the hull. The raider stopped abruptly, squinting at the shimmering vessel, then backed away slowly, uncertain. Jonas realized with a jolt that the ship had projected something, some instinctive warning, enough to unnerve a human who didn't understand what he was seeing. He let out a long breath, muscles slackening slightly. "It's working," he murmured. "She's alive, and she's protecting herself." Elara's small hand squeezed his arm. "Dad, she's amazing." Jonas nodded, still tense, eyes scanning the dunes for other threats. "Amazing, yes, but dangerous too. And we're not safe yet." The sun dipped lower toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert. Jonas stood, brushing sand from his knees. The pulse beneath his hands now beat steady, even, reassuring. The ship had accepted him, responded to him, and, somehow, he felt the first glimmer of hope that they might survive this. He looked at Alara, crouched beside the shimmering alien. "We finish tonight, kid. Then we make sure no one finds her." Alara nodded solemnly, eyes bright with determination. Jonas grabbed his tools, moving closer to the hull once more. He pressed his palms against the ship's surface, feeling the subtle vibration of life beneath his fingers. The raiders lingered on the dunes, uncertain, but for now, the living starship waited with them, breathing, aware, alive, and Jonas knew the real challenge had only just begun. Jonas crouched low behind the edge of the crater, heart hammering, as the raiders crested the nearest dune. They moved cautiously, eyes scanning, weapons ready, voices low and clipped. He felt the pulse of the vessel beneath his hands earlier that day, steady and calm, and wished he could coax that same confidence into his own body. Every instinct screamed to run, but he knew that running meant leaving Selira vulnerable. "Alara," he whispered, glancing at the girl huddled behind a ridge. "Stay down. Do exactly as I say." She nodded, hands clasped tightly over her knees, eyes wide but unwavering. Jonas glanced back at Selira, lying on the sand with her scales dimmed in quiet repose, the dorsal ridge now partially stabilized. The ship had responded to his work, pulsing in time with her breathing, colors rippling across the surface like liquid fire. He had never fixed anything like this before. Machines didn't communicate, didn't respond, didn't flinch when danger approached. Yet here she was, alive, aware, and vulnerable. The raiders paused at the crest of the dune nearest the crater, voices rising in terse murmurs. Jonas's stomach tightened. One of them was scanning the sand too closely, tilting his head, moving cautiously toward the shimmering hull. The pulse beneath Jonas's fingers surged faintly, like a warning. Selira was aware. She was sensing him and them at the same time. Jonas whispered, "Almost done, hang on." He slid along the edge of the crater, toolbox clattering against the sand, and pressed a hand against the dorsal ridge. "Hold steady." A ripple of color ran along the ship's scales in response, brightening in blues and golds. Jonas exhaled slowly. She trusted him enough to respond even as danger approached. That trust carried weight heavier than any tool he had ever carried. "Alara," he murmured, "you see what I mean? She's alive, she's aware, she's not just a ship. She's beautiful," the girl whispered. Her small hand hovered near Selira's head, trembling with awe, but she didn't touch. Jonas nodded at her restraint, impressed. Alara understood the stakes better than most adults he knew. The nearest raider moved a careful step into the hollow, and Jonas tensed. He gritted his teeth, ready to confront him if necessary, when Selira's scales flared sharply, a sudden flash of violet and gold. The raider froze, eyes widening as the colors reflected in the sand like a living prism. He whispered a curse, hand gripping his weapon tighter, unsure if he was seeing trickery, a hallucination, or something beyond explanation. Jonas felt the pulse surge beneath his hands, vibrations running through his arms. She was warning them. Not in words, but in movement, in light, in presence. The raider backed away slowly, gesturing to his companions. The other figures hesitated, scanning the dunes uncertainly. "Good," Jonas murmured under his breath. "Now, one more patch." He moved carefully along the fractured panel near the aft stabilizer. His fingers pressed against the scales, coaxing the edges together with bonding foam, smoothing lines so that the hull might withstand movement, might withstand flight. The ship pulsed beneath him, brighter now, stable enough to react but still delicate. "Alara," he said quietly, "watch the colors. When they ripple like that, it's her, thinking, deciding. We move in sync." The girl nodded, leaning slightly closer, eyes reflecting the faint violet shimmer. She whispered, almost reverently, "She's like the stories, the star guardians." Jonas exhaled sharply, a mix of awe and worry twisting in his chest. Yeah, but legends don't have raiders on their tail. A sudden sound, the scrape of boots in sand, made him freeze. One of the raiders had crested a smaller ridge, closer than Jonas realized. The man squinted, hands shading his eyes, and Jonas realized the stranger was moving deliberately toward the ship, curiosity overriding caution. Jonas grabbed a makeshift spanner from his belt. He had no intention of striking, but the weight gave him a measure of control, a semblance of preparedness. He pressed a hand against the hull, feeling the subtle vibrations of life beneath his fingers, communicating urgency. Selira responded instantly, a sharp surge of colors cascading along her scales like lightning in water. The raider froze again, eyes widening as if the ship's pulse had reached into his bones, demanding caution. He muttered something unintelligible, glanced at the others, and retreated slightly. Jonas exhaled in relief, but the tension didn't leave him. One patch remained along the aft stabilizer, and completing it was critical. He moved quickly, carefully injecting bonding foam into a small fissure, smoothing it into the living material. The ship pulsed, settling into an even glow across its dorsal ridge. He straightened, stepping back, and watched Selira shift slightly, fins undulating, eyes glimmering in quiet acknowledgement. The vessel had stabilized enough to respond, to defend itself in subtle ways, but Jonas knew it was still vulnerable, still in need of his attention. "Elara," he said softly, "she's ready for the next step. But we can't stay here. Those raiders, they'll figure this out eventually." The girl's eyes widened with a mix of fear and excitement. "We leave now?" "Yes," he said firmly. "We move when I tell you. And whatever happens, you stay with her. Don't let go." Selira's head lifted slightly, fins quivering, and a faint harmonic vibration flowed through the air, brushing against Jonas's chest like a soft warning. He understood. She was aware of the approaching threat and prepared to act, but she relied on him to guide the next steps. Jonas took a deep breath, glancing once more at the desert beyond. The raiders were cautious now, lingering, uncertain. They didn't know what they were facing. That gave him a small advantage, but not enough to be complacent. He crouched beside the vessel, pressing both hands against the hull, feeling the subtle vibration beneath his palms. Colors rippled gently, a pulse of trust and readiness. "All right," he whispered, voice low but steady. "We do this together. One step at a time. No mistakes." Elara pressed close beside him, small fingers brushing lightly against the alien's shimmering scales. She whispered, "We'll be careful." Jonas nodded, jaw set. The desert stretched wide and unforgiving around them, the sun dipping toward the horizon, shadows long and distorted. Raiders lingered nearby, unaware that the starship they sought was alive, aware, and nearly ready to move. He took a final deep breath, feeling the pulse beneath his hands, the subtle color waves that mirrored thought and intention. Selira's trust, fragile yet unyielding, anchored him. The desert could wait. The raiders could wait. Tonight, they had a chance. Jonas whispered to no one but the wind and the living vessel, "We finish this. Then we get out." The ship pulsed in answer, waves of violet and gold cascading across the scales in quiet affirmation. And for the first time since the crash, Jonas felt a measure of confidence, not recklessness, not certainty, but a resolve hard-earned and necessary. They were ready to face whatever came next. Jonas crouched low, listening to the soft hum of Selira's stabilized hull beneath his fingers, the desert wind brushing against his ears, carrying distant echoes of shifting sand. The raiders lingered, their silhouettes barely discernible atop the nearest dune ridge, speaking in low, cautious tones. Every movement they made, every shuffle of boots, triggered a subtle ripple along the ship's scales. Jonas could feel it like a vibration in his bones, a silent alarm vibrating through the living vessel. "Elara," he whispered, glancing at the girl pressed low behind him. Her wide eyes reflected the flickering colors of Selira's pulse. "Watch the lights. You see them pulse faster when danger is near?" That's how she talks. That's how she tells us what's coming. The girl nodded, still trembling but resolute. I see it, Dad. She's amazing. Jonas didn't reply. His eyes were fixed on the nearest raider, moving cautiously closer to the crater's edge. The man's movements were deliberate, testing, searching. Jonas's muscles tensed. He had no weapon, nothing beyond a worn spanner and his own instincts. But Salira's pulse surged beneath his hands, sending ripples of warning through his arms. She wasn't helpless, she was aware. And she was ready to respond if necessary. He adjusted the last fractured panel along the ship's dorsal stabilizer, coaxing the edges together with bonding foam. Colors rippled across the scales in gentle waves of gold and violet, the ship acknowledging the repair, stabilizing further. Jonas exhaled, feeling a fraction of relief, but tension remained. The raiders could not know what they were dealing with. Not yet. Salira stirred, lifting her head slightly. Fins undulated gently in the air. Move, careful, must protect, she whispered, harmonics vibrating softly around them. Jonas felt the vibration resonate in his chest. She trusted him to guide the next steps, to orchestrate their escape. Ilara, stay close, Jonas murmured. We're about to move. Follow my lead. No sudden moves. The girl nodded, fingers brushing lightly against the alien's shimmering scales. Salira responded with a faint flare of light, a ripple of reassurance that passed along the dorsal ridge. Jonas felt it, a subtle confirmation. They were aligned. The raiders were closer now, voices carrying over the hollow like low warning signals. One of them had descended slightly into the crater, peering into the sand-wrapped hull. Jonas's pulse quickened. He gripped the spanner tighter, ready for confrontation, though he hoped it would not come to that. Salira's scales flared brightly, rippling in sharp arcs of violet and gold. The raider froze, eyes widening, the shimmer reflecting in the sand like a living prism. He whispered a curse under his breath, glanced at his companions, then retreated slowly, uncertain. Jonas exhaled sharply, heart pounding. The ship had defended itself subtly, without violence, without exposing its presence to the wider desert. Good, Jonas whispered. Now, final check. He pressed his hands along the hull, feeling the even pulse beneath his palms. Every seam, every stabilizer, every repaired fracture had held. The colors flowed in smooth waves, harmonious and steady. The vessel was ready. Ilara, he said, voice low but steady, we move now. She's ready for flight, but we do exactly as I say. Got it? She nodded, eyes shining with determination. Got it. Jonas positioned himself alongside the vessel, moving slowly to avoid startling it. The pulse beneath his hands quickened slightly, responding to his touch, to the intention in his movements. He pressed a palm to Salira's head gently, and the alien stirred fully, silver eyes meeting his. Fins undulated in the air, light flaring across scales in a rhythm that resonated like a heartbeat. Follow me, he whispered. Step lightly, move slow. Ilara mirrored him, small and precise, keeping her gaze on the ship, on its pulse, on the subtle cues that told her when to stop, when to duck, when to follow. Jonas inched forward, leading them toward the shallow incline where the dunes met the horizon. Each step had to be measured, each movement could trigger a reaction from the raiders or, worse, unsettle the vessel. The ship pulsed gently beneath his hands, a silent guide, a living compass. Halfway across the crater, a sudden gust of wind swept over the dunes, kicking up sand. Jonas froze, hearing the faintest shift behind him, another raider, closer than expected. The pulse beneath his palms surged sharply, colors flaring across scales like a living storm. The raider stumbled back, shielding his eyes. Jonas realized with a jolt that Salira's warning had extended beyond the vessel, projected subtly across the sand, disorienting the intruder. Ilara, quick, he hissed, moving faster now, guiding her toward the incline. The ship remained calm beneath his hands, steadying them, guiding them with its subtle vibrations. They reached the base of the incline, the desert stretching endlessly before them. Jonas glanced back. The raiders hesitated at the crater's edge, unsure, frustrated, unable to interpret the warning that had emanated from the shimmering vessel. Scylla stirred fully, fins undulating, light rippling across the hull in soft waves. "Ready, yes, must go," she whispered. Jonas nodded to Alara. "Hold on tight. She'll lift off slowly. Stay with her." The girl's small hands clutched the edges of the vessel where her touch was allowed. Jonas pressed both hands against the hull one last time, feeling the steady pulse beneath his fingers, and whispered, "Let's go." The ship quivered beneath him, light surging along scales in response. Then, with a gentle hum that resonated through the sand, the vessel began to lift, fins sweeping gracefully, light rippling like liquid fire across its surface. Jonas stepped back, shielding Alara as the ship rose, the desert wind swirling around them, carrying the shimmer of Scylla's presence across the dunes. The raiders shouted behind them, but the vessel was already ascending, moving with a grace that defied the harsh desert. Jonas and Alara followed the contours of the sand as the ship stabilized in the air, a living star suspended above the earth. Alara's voice trembled with awe. She's beautiful." Jonas nodded, his jaw tight. "Yeah, and she's ours to protect." The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the dunes. Scylla hovered, scales rippling with steady colors, aware, alive, and ready to carry them beyond the desert and the danger that still lingered below. Jonas exhaled slowly, the tension in his muscles easing just slightly. They were not safe yet, but for the first time since the crash, hope shone in the desert heat, shimmering across the sand like the living, breathing starship before them. He turned to Alara, small and determined beside him. "We did it, but this isn't over. Not by a long shot." She squeezed his hand, eyes reflecting the steady glow of Scylla's scales. "Then we keep going. Together." Jonas nodded, gaze fixed on the horizon. The living ship pulsed faintly above the dunes, carrying with it the promise of escape, of survival, of something greater than either of them had ever known. And as the desert wind swept over them, Jonas felt it, whatever came next, they would face it as one, guided by the pulse of the alien starship and the quiet certainty of a child who had seen more than anyone else. The desert stretched beneath them, endless and merciless, but Jonas felt a strange comfort in the hum of Scylla's ship beneath his hands. The vessel moved gracefully, gliding over dunes with the ease of water flowing over rocks, fins undulating subtly to maintain balance. Light rippled across her scales in soft waves, colors shifting from violet to gold to green, as though she were breathing in the desert wind and exhaling it back as luminescence. "Alara," Jonas murmured, glancing at his daughter beside him, "hold on. Don't look down. Keep your eyes on her pulse." She nodded, small hands pressed carefully against the smooth contours of the living hull. Her eyes tracked the shifting lights, reading them instinctively, interpreting the rhythms the way she had watched Scylla's body all along. Jonas realized, with a pang of awe, that the girl understood the alien more than he did, in ways he could never hope to grasp fully. The dunes below shimmered in the late afternoon sun. Raiders trailed them at a distance, scanning the desert with a mixture of frustration and disbelief. They could see the shimmer, the glow of the vessel, but they could not comprehend what it was. Jonas knew that gave them a small advantage, enough, perhaps, to put distance between them and danger, but not enough to let him relax. Scylla tilted slightly, fins rippling, and Jonas felt the pulse beneath his hands quicken. She was aware of the raiders, aware of the distance, aware of the wind and the sun and the subtle shift in sand currents below. He pressed his palms gently against her scales, letting the vibration guide him, letting the colors flow into him like a map of intention. "Almost there," he whispered, almost far enough to be safe. Alara's voice broke softly. "Dad, she's like an angel, isn't she?" Jonas swallowed, heart tightening. "Yeah, maybe she is." He had never admitted it before, not aloud. But there was something in the way the alien moved, in the quiet grace of her luminescence, in the way she had trusted a human to repair her and guide her to safety. It felt like divine intent. He hadn't believed in angels for a long time, but the girl's certainty, and the way Celira responded, made him question everything he thought he knew. The ship pulsed brightly, a wave of violet washing over Jonas's hands. He felt her awareness expand around them, sensing the raiders' movements, gauging the safest path. Jonas adjusted his grip, leaning slightly into the motion, letting her guide them over the next ridge of dunes. Below, the raiders slowed, unsure, frustrated by the sudden change in their quarry's behavior. "Elara," Jonas said quietly, "watch the color patterns. They're telling you, she knows the safest path." The girl's small fingers pressed lightly against the hull, eyes wide. "I see it, Dad. She knows where to go." The ship dipped slightly, fins adjusting, and Jonas felt the subtle resistance beneath his hands. He balanced carefully, shifting his weight in time with her movements. The desert wind whipped past, carrying grit and heat, but the living vessel responded with smooth undulations, steady pulses that matched his own heartbeat. A sudden shadow crossed the dunes below. Jonas's stomach clenched. One of the raiders had found a vantage point, a small rise that gave him a clear view of the vessel. Jonas pressed a hand firmly against the scales, feeling the ship's pulse quicken in anticipation. "Elara, lean low," he warned. The alien responded immediately, color rippling sharply along her dorsal ridge, a warning flare directed at the observer. The raider froze, shielding his eyes from the sudden burst of light, and Jonas realized with a jolt that Celira could project subtle intimidation without ever leaving the ground. The desert stretched behind them, dunes flowing like waves, and Jonas felt a mix of awe and exhaustion. The vessel beneath them was alive, aware, and capable of defending itself in ways humans could barely comprehend. He had repaired the fractures, stabilized the hull, and yet the bond they had formed, human, child, alien, was more crucial than any tool or material. "Elara," he whispered, "she trusts us. We have to trust her now." The girl nodded, small fingers pressing firmly, eyes fixed on the pulses that told them how to navigate the next ridge safely. Jonas felt the subtle waves beneath his hands, guiding their path, a rhythm that was almost musical. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the desert, painting the dunes in bands of gold and violet. The raiders were growing frustrated, losing sight of the vessel as it moved with uncanny grace over the uneven sand. Jonas exhaled slowly. They had distance now, but not freedom. The desert was vast, but not infinite, and the night would bring new dangers. Celira shifted again, fins undulating with a quiet elegance, colors rippling in soft harmonies. Jonas pressed his palms to her scales, letting the vibration carry reassurance, trust, guidance. He could feel the ship's awareness entwining with his own, a delicate fusion of intention and motion. "Elara," he said softly, voice barely audible over the wind, "we're going to make it. Just keep watching her pulse, and trust her." The girl's small nod was firm, eyes reflecting the gentle luminescence of the living starship beneath them. Jonas felt a rare sense of calm settle over him, even as the desert stretched endless and the raiders struggled behind. For the first time since the crash, he believed that they might survive this, together. The horizon stretched before them, a band of amber and violet where the sun kissed the dunes. Celira pulsed steadily, guiding them, alive and aware, and Jonas whispered into the warm desert wind, "We'll see this through. All of us. Together." The vessel's colors rippled in response, a silent affirmation that resonated in Jonas's chest. And as they glided over the final ridge before nightfall, he realized that the impossible had become possible, not through force, not through cunning, but through trust, repair, and the quiet wonder of a living starship who had chosen to let them be part of her journey. The desert night descended quickly, a blanket of violet and indigo stretching across the sky, dust and heat giving way to the crisp chill of early evening. Jonas leaned against the hull of the living starship, Celira's scales glowing softly beneath his hands, a steady pulse reverberating through him. The raiders had fallen behind, their silhouettes swallowed by the dunes, frustrated and bewildered by the alien's subtle defenses. For the first time since the crash, he allowed himself a breath that wasn't laced with tension. "Elara," he whispered, glancing at his daughter seated carefully on the hull beside him, "look." She lifted her head, silver eyes wide, reflecting the soft luminescence of Solira's scales. Jonas pointed to the horizon where the desert merged with a distant range of jagged mountains. "See that ridge? Beyond it is safe. She'll get us there." The girl's small hand brushed against Solira's shimmering head, and the alien responded instantly with a gentle pulse of color, rippling violet, gold, and green. Jonas felt it like a warm current passing through him. She's happy," Elara whispered. "She knows we helped her." Jonas nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. It was true. The ship was alive, aware, and trusting them, a bond forged not through command or coercion but through repair, care, and quiet patience. He pressed his palms gently to the scales, feeling the vibration pulse beneath his fingers, steady and strong. The ascent began. Solira lifted from the desert floor, fins undulating in fluid motion, scales glimmering under the stars now visible overhead. Jonas held on to the hull, adjusting his weight carefully as the vessel rose higher. The desert stretched beneath them, the dunes casting long shadows in the starlight, and the raiders below became nothing more than dark specks, lost against the night. "Elara," he said softly, "she trusts you too. You see what I see, don't you?" The girl's eyes sparkled with wonder. "Yes. Dad. She's like an angel, she's real." Jonas smiled faintly, heart full. "Yeah. Maybe she is." Solira's pulse intensified, waves of light cascading across her scales in patterns that felt almost musical. Jonas felt them resonate through him, guiding their flight. He leaned into the movement, moving as one with the living starship, trusting her instincts as much as she had trusted his hands in repair. The bond between them had become something unspoken, a rhythm of understanding that transcended language. They passed over the last stretch of desert dunes. Below, shadows of the raiders' campfires flickered weakly, distant and impotent against the alien's quiet majesty. Jonas exhaled slowly. They were safe for now, beyond the reach of human greed, beyond the danger of misunderstanding. "Elara," he whispered, brushing sand from his coat as he adjusted his balance, "she's taking us somewhere better. Watch her pulse." The girl's hands hovered over the luminescent scales, small fingers sensing every ripple. "She's guiding us, Dad. She knows exactly where to go." Jonas nodded, letting himself feel the weight of relief, the quiet joy of success. For hours, they had labored, risking everything to repair, protect, and understand a being that defied every law of logic he had known. And now, as they ascended over the ridges and toward a distant valley, he realized the reward of that trust. The mountains ahead rose like jagged teeth, yet Solira navigated with ease, fins undulating to adjust their course, the glow of her scales illuminating the path. The valley beyond promised safety, a hidden cove, shielded by natural ridges and cliffs, where the desert gave way to a narrow oasis. Jonas felt the pulse quicken beneath his hands, not in fear, but in anticipation, and he smiled. "Elara," he said, voice full of awe, "we did it. Look at her, she's amazing." The girl's face shone in the reflected light, a mixture of triumph and wonder. "She really is, like an angel." Solira's fins swept gracefully, and the pulse beneath Jonas's hand softened, steady and warm, a living heartbeat that mirrored the quiet elation in his chest. He realized then that they had not only repaired a starship, they had repaired a bridge between worlds, between species, between human fear and alien grace. The vessel descended slowly into the hidden valley, landing with a grace that made the sand beneath barely tremble. Jonas helped Elara steady herself as they approached the hull, careful not to startle the alien. Solira's scales shimmered softly, fins quivering in subtle acknowledgement, a quiet gratitude passing through her gentle hum. Jonas knelt beside her, placing a hand against the smooth, living surface. "You're safe now," he whispered. Thanks to you, and thanks to her too. Elara pressed her small hand against the ship, leaning close to feel the pulse beneath her fingers. She's alive, Dad. She's really alive. Jonas nodded, feeling an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. The ship's pulse remained steady, a silent promise of life and trust, a bond sealed in repair, patience, and courage. He looked up at his daughter, silver eyes bright with wonder, and knew this was a moment that would stay with them forever. Night had fully fallen. Stars twinkled above, mirrored in the gentle glow of Solira's scales. The raiders were gone, the desert behind them a memory of peril and tension. Jonas exhaled, allowing himself to lean back, resting against the ship. She might be right, Dad, Elara whispered, her voice small but certain. She really might be an angel. Jonas smiled softly, placing an arm around his daughter. Yeah, maybe she is. And maybe that's just what the world needs, something alive, something beautiful, something that reminds us there's more than we understand. Solira's pulse rippled once more, colors washing over them in gentle waves, the vessel alive, aware, and at peace. Jonas stood slowly, brushing sand from his coat, and took one last look at the desert behind them, at the dangers they had escaped, and at the bond they had forged. Together, human and child and alien, they faced the unknown, not with fear, but with trust, courage, and quiet wonder. The living starship shimmered in the starlight, a beacon of hope and possibility. Jonas reached for Elara's hand, small fingers intertwining with his. Let's see where she takes us, he whispered. And with a gentle hum and a cascade of iridescent light, Solira lifted again, carrying them into the night, into safety, into a future full of promise. The desert stretched behind them, but ahead was hope, alive and shimmering, pulsing like a heartbeat that belonged to all three of them.